Ms. HARSHEENI Rajoo, who joined the Dyslexia Association of Singapore in 2013 and has over the years been teaching and working with students with dyslexia and other comorbidities such as attention deficit and hyperactive disorder and speech and language impairment. As a math dual specialist, HARSHEENI works closely with students dealing with fundamental mathematical challenges and dyscalculia. As an educational advisor, HARSHEENI works closely with the staff professional development team to promote well-being amongst educators through Comet, a mindfulness-based initiative. She believes that with the distinctions in health, well-being, and wellness in mind, it is vital for educators to understand the differences and apply mindfulness, which is imperative to have in a career that mentally and emotionally fulfills, challenges, and centers us. Last year, she was awarded the Educational Therapist of the Year award for her dedication and passion in helping dyslexic children achieve. Co-presenting this workshop is Ms. HARSHEENI Rajoo. She joined DAS in 2013 and has been an educational advisor with the Staff Professional Development Division at the DAS since 2016. As an EA, HARSHEENI is involved in the mentoring and training of trainee educational therapists, providing support for educational therapists, and conducting yearly quality assurance audits. In 2015, she was awarded the MEP Educational Therapist of the Year award.
That's my sister, by the way. So we came in as batchmates, and it's pretty interesting how the both of us, as much as we come from the same household, different personalities, people didn't even realize that we were sisters because we look pretty much different. So I think it is an asset in a way because you bring about two different wealth of knowledge to, of course, the things which happen at home and the DAS. So that's a fun fact. HARSHEENI and TARSHEENI. Sorry.
Last but not least, the third presenter is Ms. Pratyusha Sridhar. She joined the DAS in 2012 and has more than 6 years of experience in supporting dyslexic learners. As an EA, she assists in the training, lecturing, and mentoring of trainee educational therapists, conducts yearly educational quality assurance audits, and renders support in the form of observations, case discussion, and biannual reviews to EdTs who have students with challenging literacy or behavioral needs. In her words, my drive for professional development resonates with the work culture of the DAS. That is, to not limit my challenges, but to challenge my limits. The exposure, teamwork, and professional recognition of talents in the DAS allows me to delve deeper into the areas I'm passionate about. The title of the presentation is The Face of Educational Well-Being, Mindful to Mindful.
Yeah, quite tricky out there. Thank you, Stephen. A very good morning to all of you present here today at my presentation for a journey about having a mind which is full to becoming mindful. So I hope that has been clarified. I am HARSHEENI, and together with my principal workshop facilitators and beloved teammate, Pratyusha and TARSHEENI, we would like to warmly welcome you to today's workshop. It's going to be very fun, I can assure you that. It's going to be very interactive. And I want to start off by saying that we are gathered here today, this morning, to connect in all our differences. If you look around, which I would like to invite you to do right now, please look at people from the back seat, the different table beside you, wave, make connection, bring about awareness, spread your warmth. And most importantly, as we were speaking about connecting in our differences, it is so important to have, ironically speaking, when you talk about mindfulness, you talk about being calm, being composed, and, the Zen zone, being in your zone or finding your light, as many people would talk about it. But I would like to change the perspective here today with a recent study I had done from the center or the learning center I'm principally from. and also how we can engage in unconventional mindfulness today. So, as I was saying, a little bit of conflict is going to be involved, and I think it's nice to have a juicy controversy about mindfulness here and there, so that we look at it from a fresher perspective. Now, I always like to start my session with some grounding and breath work, because that is also my expertise. I am a professionally trained yoga teacher too. So may I invite all of you to stand up, find a nice grounding wherever you are. Place your feet hip distance apart. Your arms alongside your body, your palms probably just facing me. Relax your shoulders, and may I invite you to close your eyes or just fix your gaze at a spot on the ground if you're not comfortable. Now, this is a beautiful practice because we are all here connecting in this space. So let's start by taking a deep breath. Can you take a deep inhale through your nose, just expanding the lungs, expanding the belly, and then just completely exhaling through your mouth. I can't hear you exhale. So let's try that one more time. Inhale through your nose. Exhale through your mouth. Now we're going to do inhales and exhales just through your nose, maybe for 3 more times. And then start bringing your focus and attention to your feet. You have, thousands of nerve endings at your feet, which send messages right up to our brain. So there's so much of connection right from how we stand and how we put our posture out. Maybe on the next breath, you can roll your shoulders back, lift your chest, stand majestically. Now I want you to bring your palms together at heart center, pretty much like a prayer. So your palms together, then interlace your fingers. On the next inhale, I want you to reach your arms up and above your head, getting a good stretch here, lifting your chest. Inhale here. As you exhale, can you just tilt to the right? And then come back to the center. One more time, inhale. Now slowly open your eyes, bringing your palms together to heart center. Give yourself a wide smile. And then once again, look at each other and say, hello, welcome, nice to see you. It's definitely very nice to see all of you today. I hope you feel a bit more awakened. Now please have a seat. Thank you. Thank you for joining me in that. So, the face of educational well-being. Now, this is a term my team and I coined because as the advocates of education, or rather the allies, people who are on the front line, trying to put out an information or knowledge or a message to spread the love of knowledge, of course, learning and education, we must understand that it has to come from a place of gratitude, hope, positivity, optimism. Am I right? And I believe most of my fellow educators here and people in the industry will agree. And it comes from a largely genuine place too. So today's presentation is so much about how we can apply this in the educational setting, of course, workplace predominantly, and you don't need to bend over your back to do that. That's what I'm here to assure you about. Today's journey with me will have me help you meander around what mindfulness is all about, mindfulness for educators, which is a current initiative my team and I have put out at the DAS called Comet, which helps and supports our fellow educators, educational advisors, and ultimately the entire organization to be resilient at the end of the day. And that comes from a place of simply being mindful. Now, when I say mindful, it's not something, like I mentioned, you need to, pay I mean, don't mind me saying thousands of dollars to attend a course to find it. I would like to let you know that it is a power you just need to tap. So much so, if I may say, we spend hours and hours in a day looking at our phones, getting distracted, and that accounts for close to 6 to 8 hours. And that is practice, and we don't even have to try it, right? Because we do it every other day. But how about putting that practice and attention and effort into learning how to pay attention and being more attentive in the things we do? Bringing about more attention in the way we eat, in the way we mindfully walk, or in the way we mindfully communicate. So that is very important, because practice is what we're talking about after all, right? So why can't we translate that energy into that? So let's see where this journey takes us. And then, of course, the very famous case study I want to talk to you about, which is about the center I principally am placed at. We're going to refer to this center as Center X. And it's going to talk about the importance of creative and positive workplace culture and how, through this, we can nurture mindfulness. Or rather, we can illuminate mindfulness, which was already there, okay? And then we have layers of optimal functioning, very importantly, and how we can apply mindfulness in our everyday lives. Now, I just want to draw your attention back to the case study. The main two themes will be looking at the euthenics of the place, which talks a lot about the human functioning and how we can create conditions for it, and the ethnography, which talks about the culture, the beliefs, and what we are really made of. Okay? So the main themes will be well-being, mindfulness, and educators. Now, very shortly, I just want to digress a little. I'm sure you signed up for this session because something must have inspired you from within to find out about what is this all about. So I just want to throw this back to you. Can you quickly tell me what inspired you to want to sign up or attend to this? Sorry, may I just invite you?
Hi, at the moment I'm doing student welfare in school, and I'm planning to do this pop-up festival in the next few months, and I thought I could learn something from your session.
Thank you, very inspiring. Thank you very much. Hi sir, may I invite you to let us know what inspired you to attend the session?
Yes, I wrote a course called Growth Mindset and Critical Thinking for my students at an international school in Myanmar. And I wanted to find out a bit more about how I could sort of integrate this with what I've already sort of produced. So that's pretty much it.
Very encouraging. Thank you very much for sharing that. Now, I am going to be going around to ask two more tables. Okay, this is my favorite table, of course. A little biased. But can I just invite one of you to tell me what inspired you, besides me, not being biased, on why you're attending this session today?
I mean, apart from supporting Harsh, yeah, I think like whatever that we can learn from here would be like really inspiring. And then yeah, I'd also like to learn a little bit more about mindfulness. Yeah.
Thank you. And I am just going to go to, oh yeah, Prati was going to be helping me with that side. Thank you.
Thank you. I picked this one because I think our work as educators keeps us in our heads all the time. And you need to learn how to be calm and centered every day. And that's the only reason why I'm here.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Welcome.
And I think it's a reminder we need to set for ourselves. And of course, like I mentioned before, through practice. Practice is the power. And ultimately, learning how we don't need to look out for external resources to empower ourselves, but to just get a little bit of insight about our inside will take us places. Okay? Now, mindfulness, by the books and professionally, the godfather of John Kabat-Zinn, who is, of course, professionally talking so much about mindfulness, says that it's about paying attention in a particular way, on purpose, in the present moment, and non-judgmentally. Now, this word, judgment, is something where, hey, how can I not be judgmental, or how can I not use my judgment in certain cases? So, of course, I think it's important to look at there's a very thin line between discernment and judgment. There's a very thin line between reacting and responding. Now, if I'm going to say, let's come to reacting and responding. If I'm going to say that, hey, this has happened, and of course, maybe it infuriates you because you're a human being after all, right? How are you going to face the situation? So more than reacting, if you look at that word, it is so closely related to something very chemical, something very large and explosive. Nuclear, think about that. No one says that I will react to your email. They say I will respond to your email, or I must respond to the email. So of course, being in industry, having the love of the language, I think getting a little curious about how these terms have such huge impact, even though they just have a minor difference in the way they are being used, gives you a large perspective, an impactful perspective of how you can look at life and how you can perceive situations. To make things easy, today, just like how I do, currently I'm training my educational advisors here at the DAS on the mindfulness course. I give them 5 main elements and components of mindfulness, and it starts with attention. So how we pay attention, followed by the amount of awareness we bring to this attention, acceptance, something a little debatable too, non-identification, and choice. Now, out of these 5, I want to talk about the word non-identification. So coming back to how, as human beings, we have emotions, we are thrown into situations, especially when we are given feedback or even criticism. So how we take it also has mindfulness playing a huge role in it. Now, non-identification, when you look at it, what do you think it talks about? It's very close to judgment, yes. It has something to do with judgment. But when we talk about non-identification, can anybody just maybe tell me what are your thoughts on that? There's no right or wrong answer. That's the best part of this workshop or this situation here. Shanti, I see you smiling. I feel like she says, I want to say something. Should I now?
Maybe it's about someone saying something about you.
Okay.
Maybe a comment or a criticism. But either way, not identifying with it.
Okay.
Not letting it define you as a person.
Fantastic. And of course, beautifully said, right? That is gold. I think at the end of the day, think about this. You had a long day at work, or you didn't get enough sleep the night before. Try changing the way you put out, or how you communicate with yourself, rather. Instead of saying, I am exhausted, I am tired, similarly saying, I am Harshini, I am this, I am that, rephrase it and say, I am experiencing tiredness, I am experiencing exhaustion. Why? Because this gives you an opportunity to create space and identify what is it that you're truly experiencing at that moment. So creating space is one of those huge things, or rather one of those important and imperative things we want to consider when we're talking about mindfulness. You need to create that space for you. You do not need to let anybody else define that for you or anybody else identify that for you. It's your practice, it's you we are talking about, and ultimately we are all in our own time zones. So do not let someone else's success or speed define where you are supposed to be. Any questions so far? All okay? All following me? Great? Okay. Now, more elaborately, moving from having a mind full, we move to being mindful. So if you notice, I have actually clearly put observation and conscious choice just leaping into these 2 areas. Now, the purpose for that is because after we have learned how to create acceptance, attention, awareness, trying our best not to be judgmental or prejudiced because we feel that someone is wearing this set of clothes, or because we feel that someone walks and talks this way, it does not mean that is the person. It does not mean that is the identity. That is our lens of learning how to make sense of what we see, making sense of the subject. So if you look at this point, once we are able to identify or rather engage with the elements of mindfulness, you will come to a point of making a conscious choice. Now, this is the space you want to create so that you do not end up being here, and being rather drowning in a state of stress, and not being able to let go, or rather not being able to have the generosity of interpretation. And that is very important. Once we are not able to open that space for ourselves, then of course we tend to find ourselves in different kinds of emotional tangle and stuff like that. Now, this is a really good representation of what most of us would love to achieve. As when I say that, I talk about sitting in peace and stuff. But of course, it's a little inevitable, right? On a day-to-day life, you try your best. When you talk about mindfulness, it's so closely related to meditation. And then you say, I have friends, and I have people say, "Hey, Harsh, I can't sit and not have anything on my mind. Come on, the moment I close my eyes, I think about this, that, what I have to do later, what I have to do the next minute." So that's the thing. Of course you will have thoughts, and to not have any thoughts does not make us human, right? So what we should do is learn how to organize and prioritize what you need and create a wise relationship with the things you have in your life. So it comes back to acceptance. Acceptance, like I mentioned, a little debatable, causes a bit of conflict because it brings us to the topic of automaticity. Are we able to break out of this habit? We're so used to doing so many things, and automaticity is an important rule. You need that in life because, when you wake up, you're going to wake up, get down, get changed, or rather you could brush your teeth, wash your face, shower, all those things. You don't need to think too much about it. It saves energy, which is good because you need to know the economy of how much of energy is going to be used for certain places, right, in your life. However, when it comes to things which are, of course, larger than life, making decisions, interacting with people, you need to learn how to refresh that habit, break out of the habit rather, not refresh, break out of the habit and learn to create a healthy conflict in being constructive and being responsible in the way you think and in the way you respond, not react. So without further ado, I want to share with you this very interesting video about mindfulness. Okay. It's not too loud. Perfect.
There is a story, usually attributed to the Native American tradition, which illuminates different ways of paying attention. An elder, talking to a child, says, "I have two wolves fighting in my heart. One wolf is fearful, vengeful, envious, resentful, and deceitful. The other wolf is compassionate, loving, generous, truthful, and peaceful." The child asks, "Which wolf will win the fight?" The elder responds, "The one I feed." That doesn't mean we try to deny or hurt or kill the angry wolf. If we did that, we'd end up in a long battle, all the while somehow making that wolf more powerful through our hostility and fear. Hating that wolf sucks the strength right out of us. Instead, we calmly pay attention to the angry wolf and let go of believing they have the answers. If we can do that, they end up lying down next to us, no longer an enemy. We help strengthen the kind and loving wolf, giving it nourishment and support so that we can follow it. That peaceful wolf can become our steady companion and show us the way through all kinds of different life experiences. Restful or chaotic, enjoyable or disappointing experiences may come and go, but we can have a guide with us through it all. This is what mindfulness can help you do. Mindfulness allows us to see our thoughts and feelings as they are beginning. It's very powerful to know what we're feeling as we're feeling it, know what we're thinking as we're thinking it. With mindfulness, we can choose what will strengthen and bring into action, and we can choose what we will gently let go of. We don't have to be at the mercy of old habits or old ways of thinking or old ways of being. We are empowered. It just takes practice.
Okay, so as you would have seen, now I'm sure most of us would have met one of these wolves, right? Or rather, both of these wolves in our lives. And sometimes it's hard, you know, like emotions take over, they take control, and of course, external things. For example, how your day had been, or how someone had impacted you that day, so on and so forth, maybe the weather, and so many other things. But the thing about mindfulness here is that it teaches us, like I mentioned before, to be accepting of what we have. And that brings us to the topic of being vulnerable, and not in a negative way as how most of us would have been introduced to this particular term. Being vulnerable talks so much about gratitude, about what we have right in front of us, and being accepting of that, and not being shamed or fearful for putting yourself or your thoughts out there. So think about it. When you are again, or if you're going to face this situation where both of these wolves are staring you right in your face, right into your eyes, which one are you going to feed? Which one are you going to nurture? At the same time, you need both of these wolves, you need both of these subjects to help you appreciate and value which one you're going to keep for sustainability purpose and for your growth. So, coming down very close to the grounds we are on, education, it has, there are numerous numbers and a surge of how teachers need support, and how educators particularly are susceptible to burnout due to the nature of our job, given the fact that we're constantly having to be very present in our mind, on our toes, and being innovative. Now, if I may bring your attention closer to special education needs teacher, like the teachers here at the Dyslexia Association, right? We may have to be more open and accepting of all the other things which comes with a student. So if a student is not only, a student very traditionally may not come in only with dyslexia, they come in with other comorbidities. And just like Geeta's presentation from today, now poverty also looked like one of those morbidity, and their the nature of their upbringing, how they have been nurtured, and what has been happening in school. There's so many things which comes along with that. So typically, as the educational therapist, of course I speak for myself and my very close colleagues also, this is something you deal with on a day-to-day basis. So it becomes more of what more can we do. Here at the DAS, we have exclusive and wonderful support from our staff professional development team. We have our EAs, which is our educational advisors, deployed to the different 14 centers we have right now, and they're there most days of the week. In fact, I feel my EA at my center dedicates 7 days of her work week to us, and she's readily available to us most of the time, and I'm sure most of the other EAs are also. But beyond that, beyond giving educational support, even our educational advisors, even you could say our administrative staffs and the children, the teachers, the parents need something a little more empowering, a little more enriching for them to understand what is truly happening. So for example, like I mentioned here at the DAS, to enrich the support and the expertise being rendered by our staff professional development team, we have Comet, which is the team I'm spearheading, which is a mindfulness-based educational well-being initiative. That is why it is driving to become the face of educational well-being. How this works is that, of course, it has the influence of positive psychology, neuroscience, the science of well-being, and of course, when you talk so much about growth mindset, it is all linked at the end of the day, how you can become resilient individuals in the face of adversity. And we don't know when that comes to us. Chaos is around us, and when we talk about how we choose to see it, we talk about a pessimist and an optimist, right? The interesting thing about this, or the interesting thing about these two individuals or subjects, is that neither of them know what the outcome is going to be, right? But one of them chooses to see or chooses to have a little bit more fun when they're doing that. So that brings me to the center I'm placed at. So we have, I'll be coming to that slide very shortly, but I just want to give you that bit by bit grain so that you can build yourself for this huge reveal. We have close to 16 to 18 educational therapists. We have 2 wings, and there's room sharing. We have back-to-back classes. Highly demanding job, like I mentioned before, for specialized education, special needs education teachers. So amidst all this, and of course, administrative work, sometimes parents who tend to be a little demanding based on, of course, what the school may need, what the child may need, and what they expect of the DAS, adds up to this crazy circus, sometimes we may choose to call it, for a day in the life of an educational therapist, I would say. So how Comet is driving and giving the support would be learning to create, or rather learning to identify relevance in what is already there. So learning how to accept chaos, but at the same time creating that wise relationship with it by learning how to apply, to apply the elements of mindfulness would be paying attention to what a particular problem, what a particular challenge, which may come from a parent or a student or the job itself, is trying to tell them. So that has a lot to do with being able to practice this on a day-to-day basis, or rather frequently, so that it does not become an extra added chore, or it does not necessarily have to become something which they have to force themselves to do. So we are slowly building this culture, this scheme, so that it helps them find, or rather it helps them make it more easier to adapt to. But at the end of the day, I think mindfulness is going to be a definition very different to each and every one of us here. For me, perhaps I could sit in a room which is very noisy and still meditate. For someone else, they will just walk out because they're like, this is not happening. And that has happened in my practice sessions and in my workshops before. So I would say, learn how to adapt and create your own niche or your own unique mindfulness practice which works for you. Do not force yourself to apply a mindfulness practice which works for somebody else, but when it comes to you, you're like, maybe I'm just not good enough. Maybe I'm not concentrating. It's really not that the problem is with you. The whole idea is how you want to lessen, or rather eradicate expectations, and just work with what's right in front of you, right? And then, of course, famously, we have children in schools here in Singapore, and of course around the world, turning to mindfulness and meditation instead of going for disciplinary actions, or rather going to detention classes, to help them understand that the problem is not exactly with them, or it's not that identity you want to give the child and say, hey, you're rude, hey, you're this, hey, you're that. If I may just bring attention to the students I deal with, I have students who have ADHD, very common, we would have heard about the term, right? But the fact is, when he came to me, he came with a whole load of judgment from a place he was transferred from, a whole lot of identity that he is this way. That is what the report says. But of course, no offense to the report. I think everyone's doing their best to give out their a knowledge or information based on how it may help the teacher, help render her services to him and the parent, right? But what was so interesting about this particular case was that I personally usually start my classes with a little bit of meditation and a little bit of mindfulness practice in class. So they come in after school, they're with us in the afternoon, they must be tired, exhausted, maybe they would have even had a bad day. So as much as we do acknowledge that adults are commonly saying that, I didn't have a good day and stuff like that, we must acknowledge what the child may have had been through that day or that week, for that instance. Going the extra mile, like what most of us do here, to understand their family background helps a lot also. So when it comes to mindfulness and when it comes to my classroom practices, I start with having them sit down, and it's a little challenging, especially for some of my students who do not like to do that. They constantly love rocking the chair, and that's their jazz, you know. They feel that that is the way they can concentrate. And of course, like we know, you don't want to go and say that, stop doing that, because it takes up all the energy for them to actually come to stop doing that. So having a bit of insight on how this can be done, or how they feel, would be helpful when you want to apply mindfulness in your class, rather. So bringing mindfulness into an educational setting would be maybe starting the class with breathing techniques, teaching them to follow the movement of their breath. This helps them self-regulate, and it helps them come back to a space where they feel safe. So it takes a bit of practice. It has taken me close to, so this is term 3, it's taken me close to 20 weeks to see results for my boy. And that is something I will definitely put out in the APJDD in the upcoming, in the upcoming articles, which will be following through next year and the year after. But what we must understand is that we are not supposed to be, or we are not advised to put a timeline or a particular stamp to say that, okay, this has to be achieved by this time. If I do this, it could take an entire year for a child. It depends. You need to know how you're putting forth to it. And what I've learned, the lesson is that I did not force him to do it. I introduced it to him in a fun way. I told him that I did it, and I made sure that I modeled what I did. So as much as telling people to do something is one way of getting things done, it is also doing it together with them. Being involved together with them is what changes the entire dynamics of it. And so does how it changed the entire dynamics of a workplace, especially in an educational setting. So going closer towards our case study, specific learning difficulties. So in short, we call it SPLD. To break it down, like I've mentioned, we are experts with handling, or rather giving remediation and intervention to our dyslexics. And it comes along with the other comorbidities. Now, the staff professional development team, as I mentioned, so I pretty much would have already mentioned this, our educational advisors who come in with a pool of different kinds of expertise, of course, share their knowledge and give us our support based on mentoring, which is how they can observe, giving us educational support, classroom management, behavioral management, and of course, with the learning center support, where it's broad-based. You do co-teaching, you're encouraged to do that so they can help one another, and of course, weekly tutorials for new teachers. So like I was mentioning before, Comet, which is the mindfulness-based well-being initiative, I would like to give you a bit more insight on that. So we have a trailer queued up for you. So I'm just going to play it for you. Yes, so that was our mini trailer on Comet. If you are new to understanding what it's all about. So, and of course, I believe it must have been a bit of a treat for our Game of Thrones fans here, who would have recognized the theme music from there. It is, of course, copyright protected, and we have gotten licensed too. So, like I mentioned, this has so much to do with the different aspects of it. Of course, fundamentally, it has a lot to do with well-being, right? When we talk about well-being, it is a construct. It is not something which you can define with one word. So when I'm going to say, hey, what is well-being to you? For someone, it could be, oh, it's about happiness. For someone, it could be, it's about being healthy. For another person, it could just be positive thinking. So well-being is an entire construct, but the elements of mindfulness and how we apply it sensibly, practically, and of course relevantly brings us to our own level of understanding well-being. So, like I mentioned, we are a branch of the Staff Professional Development Team, and integrating the different institutes of positive psychology, neuroscience, and of course, driving it through the heart of mindfulness. We are currently putting out a training for our educational advisors, like I mentioned. And through this training, it's a 1-year-long training. I have been trained in this sterling program called Mindfulness X, which is systematically designed, science-based mindfulness training program, which is very clearly something which is so applicable and relevant to educators especially. So it's a white label program, and the beauty of it would be that you could tailor it according to your own workspace or your own setting if you want to apply mindfulness. So when you come to mindfulness, like I mentioned, it comes to your well-being. So how can we identify silence, being calm, observation, breath, and slowing down as a resource? So we are constantly in a time and pace where you just want to move forward. You want to go on to the next thing. And I simply feel that there's nothing wrong in that, because you want to keep up with trends and you want to keep up with what's coming on or what's going to be thrown on to you next. You have to be on your toes, especially our job, right? But the beauty would be that if you take a step back, and if you have tried it, you will agree that things look different, number one, and they look more powerful, or rather they look more valuable than they were actually painted to be. So try grappling a little with this idea on what can silence do for you, what can an innate sense of calmness do for you. And when we talk about calmness, it's not so much to do with not responding, or rather just simply sitting or finding a space to only meditate. I think calmness is something which has to be the foundation of the many things we want to achieve. Finding that equipoise at the end of the day, where you are not having a deficit or a hype in your emotions or in the way you think. I think it's about learning how to find that balance point and working your way from that. So I have this activity which I did in my last year's workshop, and I also do with my students in class. So it's called Becoming a Star, and it's about breathing, as in learning how to engage your inhalation and exhalation by tracing over a star, which we are giving to you as a souvenir from today's session too. So we're going to, Tarshini and Pratyusha are going to be passing this star around. I just want you to have a look at it. And of course, this is for you to take back home. I mean, keep it in your diary, keep it at your workspace. If you feel that you need to take a moment, you want to take 5, take a break, look at the star, or maybe you can imagine a visual of your favorite shape. And then I want you to place your index finger, your dominant index finger, on the tip, or rather where the inhale starts. And then let's do this together. So we're going to place your index finger on the breathe in, so it goes up to the summit. Hold your breath, 1, 2, and then you breathe out as it comes. And then breathe in, hold, breathe out. Coming down to breathe in and breathe out. So just go for the entire rotation and revolution until you finish the entire star space practice. So I'm sure most of us are almost done in this process. There's so many different kind of shapes you can try this with. You can try this with your circle, if you want to take it up a notch level, you can go with your figure 8, which takes a little longer. But why am I emphasizing so much on the breath? Now, the breath is hugely, and I would say very importantly, connected to the way we react, or rather respond, if I may say. Now, your breath is connected to your sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems. So one being in a fight or flight mode, which is very common, and the other one being a rest and digest zone, right? So when you are taking deep breaths, you're regulating your oxygen levels. It happens, it goes both ways. It's a way for you to engage the brain and, of course, promote circulation. That's number one. And number two, when you find yourself in a situation where there's chaos and you can't make a decision and someone is just not saying the best things to you, take a moment, step aside, and start engaging in deep inhalations and exhalations. Learn to hold the breath, because holding it helps you find a sense of anchor, and then when you release it, the kind of you're actually sending out a message to your brain and the rest of your body in the process of harmonizing your hormones in it. Okay, so try it the next time round. Deep breaths are not just deep breaths or it's not just a lip service where you say it. It has so much to do with how you are harmonizing the way your body is reacting, or rather responding at that time and space you're in. If you want to make this more interesting, you can try it with children by having a bit of an astronaut or a space theme in the star, and then you can get them to do it. So I do this with my kids in the classroom quite often, especially when they have not had the best day in class. They're coming in, and they're only 8 years old, and they're having a hard time in school, which is quite crazy. I think just imagine the amount of things they have to deal with on top of, trying to understand, number one, what dyslexia really is and what is going on with their brains. And of course, how they're made fun in school, how not all teachers are very understanding, and of course, how their peers react to them. So, the great reveal, my favorite part of all. How Comet basically came about and how this mindfulness well-being initiative came about was drawn very deeply from an inspiration which comes from the center I'm at. So we're going to label it Center X. There are about 16 educational therapists, and the situation there would be that there is space sharing, 2 different wings, we share rooms, and there's rising student numbers. We have one of the highest student numbers at this particular center. And of course, when I say ad hoc stress, you don't know what comes where or when, right? So all these extra bits. And like I mentioned, because we are catering and we are helping our dyslexics achieve here, there is just more than lesson planning and reading reports and finally coming up with an execution of a lesson. You need to understand your student or the child as an individual first, which takes a large, or I would say a very intense level of mindfulness and attention before just giving them worksheet or giving them some work to do and having a result come out of it. Of course, you need to tailor your lessons. You need to understand how you can put it out to them and what is going to help them evolve and leave with an impression. So, as much as this center I am from is busy and we have so many things going on, a few kind souls in the center, and I would like to look at it as how they have taken this great initiative to stop, to pay attention, bring about awareness, not identify with the challenges which are bringing them down on some days or which are just pushing them a little off the edge, but to stop and think that, hey, there needs to be more to just coming in, waking up, coming in, planning, executing, going home. I mean, of course, you eat in between and then sleep. What they did was create space through creativity, through positivity, and of course, through the train of mindfulness. So at our center, when everything was so busy and everything was, pretty much like a circus I'd mentioned before, a really good circus, and when I say circus, I don't mean it in a bad way. I mean where we are agile because of that. We have created agility, both mentally and physically. We are moving around. We are getting to know each other in that sense. What has happened is a very interesting game. It's a mission-based game which was introduced to us a couple of years back, where you're assigned to another EdT or a particular person. An EdT, when I say EdT, it's an educational therapist, to take care of them secretly. So it's an angel and mortal game, if you guys would have heard about it, but you're assigned to take care of this other person secretly over a term. You buy them gifts, you write them positive notes of encouragement, and this has gone on for a series of time. It's pretty much like watching your favorite drama. You have seasons and seasons of it. So we have a season which is still running up till now, so it's a good hit, that means, to a point that we all pretty much know how all of us like our coffee, our tea, whether with sugar, without sugar, thick, not thick. That is how much we have grown together in this process. And I think that is very important. I mean, you don't want to have bad coffee when you're having a bad day, right? So this is how close we have evolved. And I think the beauty of mindfulness here is that it is so much about nurturing a community within where you are, just like how you would raise a family with so much of love. I am not going to share the exact results of the case study here, solely because I want to encourage you to read the APJDD, which will have the final findings of it. But all I can say is that it may move you, it may drive you to tears. So just a little word of caution. But yeah, coming back to this. So it brings us to the topic of collective mindfulness. So mindfulness is one thing. You have all the 5 different elements, as I have spoken to you about. And then it drives you a little closer to a more unique aspect of collective mindfulness. Learning how to do things creatively. Encouraging each other to do it. So, you know, our brain has mirror neurons, right? So if something is going to be portrayed or demonstrated in a negative light, it kind of affects everybody else, wherever you are, especially when you're in a close-knitted organization or a center, from wherever I am, to be specific. So how this mission-based game and every other effort, which I will be sharing with you, has influenced the way we look at challenges, the way we look at challenges, has only made us more resilient at the end of the day. So my point here is that you do not necessarily have to say that I need this, a meditative room, or I need to be away from all this noise and all that is going on in order for me to feel peace. What we have done here, or what rather my entire center has done here through the train of mindfulness and initiative, is to be able to be accepting of what's happening, acknowledging it, and being vulnerable to it. So being able to draw that line and find that equipoise at the end of the day, and still make work so much more than just coming in, planning, and then leaving. So it is from becoming work, plan, eat, go home, sleep. It has become work, plan, play, have fun, eat, and then go home, sleep. So the process has become a little lengthier, but so much more sustainable. And that's what we want to aim and work towards. So these are a couple of initiatives we have been putting out here at the center, the mission-based games, and I've also organize it as to what are the mindful elements we can zoom into. So the mission-based games is where you're attached to a particular colleague whom one takes care of and secretly has been assigned another EdT to be taken care of. So if I'm going to be taking care of person A, secretly someone else is taking care of me. And of course there's a grand reveal and finale at the end of it, who is it? So more than anything, like I mentioned, it's about that conflict I mentioned to you about, right? It's about breaking out of your habit and doing it in a fun way. And then, of course, we have our team lunches, which I believe most of our workplaces have. What I love so much is collective decision making. Your problem is my problem, and you are not left alone. I can attest to that, and that happens so much at this place I'm in from. So this can be, a problem where it could be about my scheduling with classes, with a student, or I could probably just may have had miscommunication with a parent, or it could have been a complaint which I had sent in because of this miscommunication or misunderstanding. But you're not left alone. Because of what has brought us together, or what has come out of this collective mindfulness, we stand together in the things we do, and it has brought us together as one huge big family. And of course, acts of kindness and empathy. So there was a not great event which happened, and I'm not going to go into details for specific reasons, of course, but it did affect a group of us in a very sensitive and, of course, a rather huge manner, because it left an impact and a mark for most of them. So what we did, or what each one of us did, was to leave origami notes, giving them encouragement, and making them feel like they're not alone in what they're experiencing. Of course, it's easy to say that, hey, I know how you're feeling, but that is so much to do with a surface level of making the person feel all right. But we would never truly understand what someone goes through, because of course you can't get into their minds, right? You need to be able to, the best you can do, or rather the least we can do, would be to create that environment, which brings us to making sure that we share a core belief of ensuring that each one of us are taken care of and no one is left out. So a few examples and definitions from the paper I'm currently writing on what collective mindfulness is about. So I'll just go through a few. To stay mindful despite hazardous environments, frontline employees consider constantly 5 principles tracking: small failures, resisting oversimplification, remaining sensitive to operation, maintaining capabilities of resilience, and taking advantage of shifting locations of expertise. So the thing about where or how we work is that more than just having your own room assigned to you to teach, I mentioned before that we are actually sharing rooms, and we are, to an extent where most of my students know another teacher student, and my fellow colleague probably knows the names of most of my students. So it has created this sense of identity, which does not just leave you at a point where you only know my students, or you only know your students and not my students. So that is what a community does, right? It helps to lift one another up, it helps one another grow, and it makes sure, like I mentioned before, not leaving this fellow colleague or your teammate behind. Interestingly enough, if I may just share, I recently shared, so we have this initiative here with Comet, which is called Mindful Mondays. So we share reminders on a weekly basis on Mondays. So when I send them out, I had heard about how this anthropologist who was in Africa, and he spoke about this culture where the tribes people believe in this term called Ubuntu. I am not too sure if most of you have heard about it, but it has a lot to do with teamwork. And it was about how he set up a game, and he got this group of children to run forth, and the one who picks up the ball, or this instrument, I believe, gets the candy. But the beauty and what was moving was that they waited for one another to reach together. And when the anthropologist asked, why did you do that? So he was saying that, how can I be happy by not, how can I be feeling fulfilled and happy or contented if my fellow friend or my friend is not experiencing the same level of fulfillment? So this teaches us so much, and this comes from children, right? So Ubuntu, I think you should go and read up on it. It is very interesting. Now, I mentioned earlier about the layers of reaching mental well-being. So we have cognitive, attention, cognitive, and emotional. Now, this is a layer which was termed by Dr. Alan Wallace, who drives the Santa Barbara Institute of Consciousness Studies, an expert in the Tibetan Buddhism. Please do check him out too. I recently attended a mind-blowing workshop earlier this year, rather. Yeah, we had 6 months into the year, and I just said recently. So yeah, early this year. And he coined it very beautifully, saying that it always starts with cognitive. We hear so much about cognitive, right? Cognitive talks so much about your willingness, your willpower, and your volition towards why you're doing something. So as human beings, we always want to find a sense of purpose, a connection, and meaning to what we're doing. If I'm just going to throw you something and tell you, no, just do it because you have to do it, there is not going to be, yes, you may do hard work, but your heart may not connect to it, right? So cognitive is one thing you want to look into. It's based on Dr. Alan Wallace. And then slowly you come to attention. So when you talk about attention, when there is a deficit, it is an issue. When you have too much of it, where your mind is running all over, that also becomes a challenge. So learning how to draw a balance in your attention or attentive intelligence is one. Then cognitive intelligence, of course, important, before we reach the emotional stage, would be teaching us how to process and organize our thoughts. So that is where cognitive intelligence comes in. And finally, emotional. So very much like attention, we want to learn how to deal, or rather create that wise relationship I have been repeatedly mentioning with subjects, so that it does not identify you, it does not make you get, or rather make a rash decision. So I want to link this to something very local. I've localized it. So for our foreign friends who don't know what we're talking about, this is a very sweet connection I want to make. So what does this look like to my fellow Singaporeans or our Asians here? Anybody? Mike? Yes, very good. Kueh lapis. Now, kueh lapis is a little different for some of us. Some of us say, hey, that's a cake. But what I know is this. I grew up with this. So it's this sweet snack you might want to check out if you're here in Singapore. And the beauty of this would be how it has layers and layers of so much of goodness, and ultimately making your life even more colorful. If you are into mindful eating, kueh lapis is a great way to start with that. You start one layer, you savor it, value it, and then see, what does this tell me? Have you satisfied all your corners of your taste buds? And then you probably will look at eating in a very different way. So of course, this is a bit more elaborate in terms of what cognitive, attentional, cognitive, and emotional well-being is all about. These are on my PDF slides, so it will be a repetition if I mention it again. And ultimately, like I mentioned, exploring mindfulness. So I had broken it down into euthenics and ethnography. So we talk so much about human functioning and well-being, which is important in our workplaces, especially in an educational setting. It talks a lot about human flourishing. We all want to be happy, but how can we attain that? How can we value that? And is it always about just being optimistic? I think it's learning how to draw the line and using different lenses and having the generosity of interpretation in the things we are put in. And of course, learning, when we talk about ethnography, we talk a lot about our culture and conducive environment. This is a very straightforward and simple summary of what we had covered so far. Now, without further ado, I would actually like to spend 5 minutes very quickly. It's a jazz job where you have to come up with a positive message, a mindful positive message as an activist. So I'm going to give each one of your table a piece of paper, an A4 size paper. We're giving you some stationaries. Come up with a positive message which is short, crisp, and powerful. An example of that would be, where is that? Okay. So these are examples of posters which some of my students have done, some of what I have done. So it would be fresh start, stay present and aware. Or something as simple as just breathe. So I would have just given you some information on how it's connected to your nervous system, right? So now you know, by looking at that, it is simple, but it's really powerful, because we're not just talking about the movement or air here. We're talking about what happens inside. So it's time to reacquaint yourself with your fellow team members on the table. Come up with your fanciest but simple poster on a positive mindful message. And these posters will be displayed down later for the poster presentation, where you can go and look, and everyone else probably have something fulfilling and enriching to take. So your time starts about right now. You can start thinking. I'm going to be leaving these up for a while. Do you want me to give some more? Do you all have stationaries? Okay. Do you all have stationaries? Okay. Oh, really? I know I will. I just have to do something real quick. Okay. I need to open this. I'll bring you one for you, and you all want to have fun. Who doesn't have writing materials? I mean, I have color pencil, I have crayons here. All of you have? Okay, we only have 5 minutes, so you need to go all out and put out one message. Okay. You guys good here? Fantastic. That is good. It's connecting with the differences. That's what I love. Thank you. Test, test. They've like Thank you for assistance. No problem. I think maybe they don't need to write the message for themselves. Not much time. Yeah. I want to release them on time.
I came in late, so can I get your name?
My name is Harsheeni.
Yeah, and can I get your card?
I don't have my card on me right now, but I'll just put out my email address on the slide. Sure, I will. Yes.
Like whom do you work with?
Okay, so basically I work at the DAS, the Dyslexia Association.
Yeah.
So I'm an educational advisor and a teacher too. Right now I'm facilitating a mindfulness-based well-being initiative.
That's
and I'm
great.
training the educational advisors first because they are the first point of contact for our educational therapists.
So can anyone attend? I mean, can we enroll to, because I'm from Madras Dyslexia Association,
Right.
I'm one of the founder members of the group from Chennai.
Right.
You might have met them
Yes,
because they
of
have,
course.
they've been actively involved with them.
Involved, yes, correct.
So I was just wondering, but you running these workshops, like what duration is
So
it?
usually this workshop or this training is in-house at this point. We're working to bring it out externally, so that's why this is my first conference, in fact. And then hopefully we will extend it to our fellow conference attendees in future. Yes, but please, let's keep in touch.
Yeah, I would love to have your...
Yes, I will just write you.
Yes, please. Just a minute.
Test. So we have 2 more minutes, round up, give us your best. It does not have to be very fancy, just write what comes out from the heart, basically. And yes, with that, in about a minute or so, I'll be coming around to collect your art pieces, your masterpieces, very important messages. So I'd like to thank all of you from the bottom of my heart on behalf of my team and DAS for attending my workshop today. I hope it has been fulfilling and enriching as it has for you, for me too. So thank you. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful rest of the conference today and tomorrow. And I'll just be around. My name is HARSHEENI. I will be flashing my email address on the screen soon. Get in touch with me if you have any questions. And have a great day ahead. Thank you.